Sant Jordi is a typical Catalan holiday, also known as the Day of Books and Roses. It's celebrated each year on April 23rd. Sant Jordi the man is also quite international. You probably know him by the name Saint George. George, the Christian martyr and the dragon slayer, is venerated around the world as a liberator, a protector of the poor, a physician to the sick, and more. So today we're talking Sant Jordi, both the Catalan celebration and the life of the saint. We're also going to address some popular myths here in Catalonia. George was born in Cappadocia in modern-day Turkey in the 3rd century AD. His mother, allegedly from Lydda in what is now Israel, raised him as a Christian, and he eventually became an officer in the Roman military. He was martyred under Emperor Diocletian in the year 303, although stories vary about what exactly happened and when. Basically, for refusing to recant his Christian faith, he was arrested and tortured. The next day, he was paraded around town and beheaded. Historically, the Emperor Diocletian is known to have persecuted Christians, and in 303 he purged followers of Christ from his army, so at least parts of this story are quite plausible. Scholars suggest that there probably was a historical St. George, which is more than you can say for some of those early saints and martyrs. Hey everybody, it's Daniel. Welcome back to Spain to Go, the best podcast in the entire multiverse for all things Spain. This is episode 137 about St. George the Dragon Slayer. I've got 3 shout-outs today, and they're all for multi-donors. First up, we've got Jean-Marc. Jean-Marc donated a couple of years ago, I think, and he sent me a comment talking about how he travels back and forth from The Hague up in the Netherlands to Barcelona, to the town of Montcada, which is just outside Barcelona, where he has a company. Thank you very much, Jean-Marc. I should be meeting Jean-Marc soon for a coffee, because he's in Barcelona these days. JR from Texas also donated again. JR says, keep up all your good work and the wordsmithing. Wordsmithing is something I spend a lot of time on down here, so thank you, JR. JR has donated multiple times in the past. Finally, we have Bob again. Bob is the tanker pilot from the Vietnam War who came to Barcelona a few weeks ago. We had dinner. He sent a further donation. I talk more about Bob at the beginning of my previous episode, episode 136, on Holy Thursday, golden calves, and God-shaped holes. I was feeling pretty deep that day. Anyway, if you would like to donate, you can. expatmadrid.com/donate. Just go over to expatmadrid.com/donate, which will take you to the donation page. The donation page allows you to donate anything from 10 euros on up to however much you want. If you have donated before, don't worry. A lot of people donate multiple times. I have people who have been listening to this podcast for years. I am eternally grateful for that. I'm certainly not among the world's most popular podcasts here, but I do have a following in Spain and among people in other countries who are interested in Spain. So thank you very much. expatmadrid.com/donate is the donation page. Thank you very much to all donors past and present. Let's get back to the legend of St. George. The famous story about slaying the dragon was added to St. George's legend later. The earliest reference to dragon slaying is from the country of Georgia in the 11th century. From there, the addition spread into European legends, thus creating the image of George we know today, sitting on horseback with his spear going through the dragon's neck. The longer version of that legend is as follows. George arrived in the city of Cyllene in Libya and found a dragon holding the residents hostage. To keep the dragon from ravaging the city, they would give it 2 sheep every day. But when 2 daily sheep were no longer enough to placate the beast, the townsfolk started sending their own people to die in the dragon's jaws. Eventually, the king's daughter was selected for sacrifice. But just then is when George showed up to slay the dragon and save the princess and the city. The king offered George a pile of treasure as a reward, but George insisted that the treasure be used instead to feed the poor. The astonished townspeople converted to Christianity en masse. Today, St. George is the patron of knights, soldiers, archers, cavalry, riders, and saddlers, and he helps those suffering from leprosy, plague, and syphilis. You might also invoke his name if bitten by a poisonous snake. St. George is venerated around the world. The country of Georgia in Eastern Europe has exactly 365 Orthodox churches named after George. According to legend, his body was divided after his death into 365 parts, one for each day of the year, which were spread to churches in every corner of the country. Elsewhere, St. George's cross, a red cross on a white background, is the flag of England and part of the symbols forming the Union Jack. The Cruz de Sant Jordi, as it's known in Catalan, also appears twice on the flag and the coat of arms of the city of Barcelona, as well as on the logo of Barça, the football club. Here in Spain, St. George is the patron of Catalonia and also of the neighboring region of Aragon. The city of Cáceres in Extremadura also venerates St. George as its patron. With its large and well-preserved medieval city center, Cáceres is a place you should definitely visit if you are in the area. I started my bike tour of Extremadura there a couple of years ago. That is, of course, episode 94, if you would like to hear more about that. Here in Catalonia, St. George is celebrated on the 23rd of April every year. It's the Diada de Sant Jordi, which is the occasion for this article. So let's get back to that. Some people refer to Sant Jordi as Catalan Valentine's Day. I've even heard conspiracy theorists suggest that Valentine's Day was imported into Catalonia only to dilute the Catalan tradition. Something about the Corte Inglés department stores wanting to eliminate Catalan identity for some reason. Anyway, exchanging red roses with loved ones certainly gives it a Valentine's Day-like vibe. Booksellers come out and set up stalls on the central streets in Barcelona, specifically La Rambla, the nearby Rambla de Catalunya, and Passeig de Gràcia. There are usually authors who appear to sign their books. If you follow your favorite authors on Instagram or elsewhere, they will announce this in advance. In other neighborhoods, the local bookstores bring book displays out onto the sidewalks, and roses are available everywhere. If you live in a smaller city in Catalonia, there's probably something going on as well. This celebration has been happening since 1931, and April 23rd was chosen because it's the date that both Shakespeare and Miguel de Cervantes, author of Don Quixote, died, allegedly. In 1995, UNESCO named the 23rd of April World Book Day, and the rest is history. But the next few sections of this article I'm calling Mythbusters, and we're going to start our Mythbusters series with William Shakespeare and Miguel de Cervantes. So, both Shakespeare and Cervantes are recorded as dying on April 23rd, 1616. They were contemporaries and died in the same year. However, the idea that Shakespeare and Cervantes died on the same day is wrong. According to the Folger Shakespeare Library, Spanish death certificates at the time listed the date of burial instead of the date of death. If Cervantes was buried on the 23rd, he probably died on the 22nd of April. And Shakespeare died 11 days later, on May 3rd. The discrepancy arising because of the difference between the Julian and the Gregorian calendars. In other words, Shakespeare died on April 23rd according to the Julian calendar, but that date corresponds to May 3rd on the Gregorian, the calendar in use in Spain at the time and commonly used today. If you want even deeper levels of conspiracy, you should know that the Catalan regional government once spent around 3 million euros producing documentaries that claim that both Cervantes and Shakespeare were Catalan. Yes, La Generalitat de Catalunya spent plenty of perfectly good tax money on this, even publicizing the claim that both Shakespeare and Cervantes were the same man, a Catalan from Alicante, named Joan Miquel Sirvent. That's big news if true, because it would raise the number of famous Catalan authors from 0 to 1. I've talked about famous Catalans on here before. There are a few. Salvador Dalí and the singer Rosalia spring to mind. But Shakespeare and Cervantes are only Catalan according to whack-job pseudo-historians with large government subsidies. However, that's not the only conspiracy theory I'm unpacking today, because in the research for this article and podcast, I ran up against another giant Catalan myth. So let's talk about whether or not the Catalan language was banned by the dictatorship. Spanish Wikipedia says that Sant Jordi celebrations were banned by Franco in the mid-20th century. I decided to independently confirm that before putting it in the article, and in doing so, I opened a virtual Pandora's box of Catalan lies and partial truths. So here goes. First, I found an article in El Debate that killed a myth I had heard plenty of times. The myth that the Catalan language was prohibited during Franco's dictatorship. That turns out not to be the case, although I would discourage you from debating your Catalan in-laws on this point. It's widely known and repeated, but apparently not true. El Debate points to an article in La Vanguardia from 1960 announcing a prize called Premio Sant Jordi for books written in Catalan. Not exactly what you would expect if the language was banned. Just a brief reminder, the dictatorship went from 1939, when Franco won the Civil War, until 1975, when he died. So 1960 is definitely within the years that you would consider to be the Spanish dictatorship. That same article points to the fact that between 1952 and 1974, almost 6,000 books were published in Catalan. Several important Catalan writers began their careers. The language was taught in universities. Popular singers like Joan Manuel Serrat sang in Catalan. You can find recordings of Joan Manuel Serrat on YouTube of songs that he recorded in the 1960s in Catalan. I believe one is called Paraules d'Amor, which would be words of love. What does appear to be true is that Catalan was banned from use in the government and in the public administration. And it's quite possible that loudly speaking Catalan in public was a political statement that might get the attention of the police. The Objective, which is a Spanish newspaper, for some reason called The Objective in English, The Objective has a lot more to say. The article is called Franco no prohibió el catalán. That's in Spanish if you would like to check it out. The author is Sonia Sierra. And as Sierra points out in that article, this is actually a very important point because the Catalans base a lot of their arguments on using Catalan exclusively in schools around the idea that the Catalan language was prohibited during the dictatorship, so now it's only fair, I guess, that they use Catalan exclusively. I wrote about Franco recently. It's a longer article that talks about Franco and the Civil War. He was certainly not friendly with Catalan independence. I'm going to do a second part of that at some point this year because I have the second part of Franco's biography about the long dictatorship. So I'm sure that will come up in the future as well. Either way, it appears that the whole Catalan was illegal thing is nothing more than an urban legend. I researched it from various angles, and it doesn't look like private use of Catalan was illegal or anything like it during El Franquismo. That made me think of another myth that I had heard and whether or not it was true. Because at some point someone told me that Barça, the football club, was banned during the dictatorship. Turns out that is not true either. There was, of course, pressure to remove the Catalan independence elements in Barça fandom, and again, the Catalan language was eliminated from official team bulletins. But Barça survived and became symbolic of a sort of subtle resistance to Franco. Side note, in 1925, Barça was suspended from play for 6 months because fans had whistled derisively during the Spanish national anthem. That was during the dictatorship of Primo de Rivera, whose son went on to found the Spanish fascist movement. So there was a ban on Barça briefly under another of Spain's many dictators. As I explained in my article on Franco and the Civil War, the coup d'etat in 1936 and the dictatorship following was not all that unusual in Spanish history. In fact, if you look over the last few centuries, you will find one coup after another and a long series of dictatorships. I'm sure the Catalans have plenty of legitimate reasons to complain about Franco, and I'm guessing we will get to them in my future article about the dictatorship coming within the next several months. I also mentioned in episode 96 of this podcast about symbols of Spain that a lot of Spanish people would rather not hear their own national anthem or look at their own flag. There are reasons for this, also involving the dictatorship. It's explained in episode 96. But let's get back to the day of Sant Jordi, because recently it would appear that we are celebrating Sant Jordi without the masculinity. Last year, I noticed something odd about the Sant Jordi celebrations here in Barcelona. St. George the man had been mostly erased from them. There were stalls selling books and roses, of course. There were little plush dragon toys on sale everywhere as well, but no images of St. George. Most of the official posters I found from last year seem to bear this out. There were books, roses, and dragons. Cute dragons, sometimes reading, but virtually no St. George. Of course, I understand that knight with impressive lance saves princess isn't a narrative we want young people to be absorbing in these forward-thinking times. And the violence. Couldn't St. George have invited the dragon to share a plant-based meal with him instead? They could have sat down and talked about the pressures they both felt to fit in with society's expectations about heteronormative masculinity, and about where their anger comes from. Maybe in that way, they could have set aside the whole toxic Slayer versus Dragon dynamic, and everyone would have been the better for it. This year, the official posters here in Barcelona were done by an Italian graffiti artist known as TV Boy. One depicts a book with a rose, one has a man kissing a woman in dragon pajamas. The final poster has St. George petting the dragon on the head, with a large floating heart representing the obvious love between the two. It's quite touching, but completely misses the point. So let's finish today by talking about the true meaning of St. George's Day. I have recently learned through comments on various platforms that people do not always pick up on my obvious sarcasm. So let me be clear here. The point of the legend of St. George is that we need strong, brave men to go out and defend civilization from the evils lurking outside the walls. The point is that cowards without moral clarity will try to placate evil. Maybe they will sacrifice their sheep or their neighbors or even their children to the dragon or what it symbolizes. Anything to maintain their comfortable lifestyle and their feeling of being above it all. After all, the dragon's out there, not in here, and it's asking to be placated. Maybe this diplomatic strategy will work for a while, but it's not a solution. It's just weakness and procrastination. And meanwhile, the dragon gets stronger with every day. The point of going out and slaying the dragon is that good triumphs over evil, that order triumphs over chaos. And for the hero, the point is that he is transformed and born again in the process. This is basic Joseph Campbell stuff and timeless as well. Ignore the point at your own peril. That's about all I've got today. If you like this, you might like my recent articles and podcast episodes on St. Ignatius of Loyola. St. Ignatius from the Basque Country founded the Jesuit order. I've also got one about Sagrada Familia and its architect Gaudí. Sagrada Familia is almost finished, and the architect Gaudí is nominated for sainthood. He's in the process of possibly achieving sainthood. So I talk about the building and also the life and times of Gaudí. Sagrada Familia is episode 133, and Saint Ignatius of Loyola is the previous one, episode 132. The bit about people missing my obvious sarcasm comes from some comments I received on my American Refugees episode. So if you want to hear about Americans fleeing from oppression and moving to Spain to live lives of luxury, you can check that out. That is, I think, 2 episodes ago, episode 135. There's a lot you can listen to here. Earlier, I mentioned biketourinSpain.com. Actually, I didn't mention that specifically. I mentioned my bike tour around Extremadura a couple of years ago. That was organized by my friend Raúl at biketourinSpain.com. Just go directly to biketourinSpain.com if you would like. He has several options for tours. It's getting towards bike touring season, so you can sign up for one now if you want. I'll be going on his tour of La Rioja later this year. La Rioja and El Camino del Cid. El Cid is another one of Spain's national heroes from the days of the Reconquista. Anyway, if you just go to biketourinSpain.com, you can check out his various options. I did the route of Don Quixote, which was great, and the Extremadura route, which was better than great. It was literally one of the best experiences I've had in 20 years or more living in Spain. Anyway, there are plenty of companies imitating what Raúl is doing, so you have to go to biketourinSpain.com, specifically that URL. Tell Raúl that Daniel from the podcast says hi. He's been supporting for a long time. If you want something a little bit less active, you could go to expatmadrid.com/walks. expatmadrid.com/walks will take you to the page for walks tours. I get a small commission if you sign up for something. They have a tour of the Prado Museum before it opens in the morning that's spectacular. They also have Sagrada Familia here in Barcelona, where they take you around in the afternoon with the sun shining through the stained glass. I haven't been on that one yet, but I'm sure it's incredible. Just take a look at the various offers on expatmadrid.com/walks. They have tours here in Spain and also in other places around Europe, especially Italy. I think they have a Vatican tour if you're into that. Also, we have expatmadrid.com/devour. Devour Tours was founded by my friend Lauren back in the day. Lauren has been on this podcast. She now has a company giving tours in different locations in Spain and also around Europe. They are food tours, so a guide will take you from place to place, feed you delicious food, and explain some of the culture and history behind it. I did their Plaza Mayor tour back in Madrid several years ago. I enjoyed it a lot. That is expatmadrid.com/devour, DEVOUR. I get a bit of a commission if you sign up for something there. I appreciate it. Lauren will also appreciate it. Other than that, I have a YouTube channel, Learn Spanish with Daniel. I am giving brief Spanish lessons on there. You can just check that out. Put Learn Spanish with Daniel into the YouTube search box. You could also probably go to youtube.com/Learn Spanish with Daniel, all is one word. You know how URLs work at this point. But yeah, check that out. I give lessons about Spanish language with some cultural knowledge, of course. I talked the other day about Barça, the football club, Barna, the abbreviation for the city of Barcelona, and other like hyper-local vocabulary that Barcelona people know. I also made one about Spanish greetings. It's called Stop Saying Hola. You can say hola, but most of the time you do not say hola to people you already know. You probably say buenos dias or buenas tardes or something like that. So I give the whole rundown of different Spanish greetings and when and why you should use them. That's just 2 examples of my recent videos. Finally, you can donate to this podcast at expatmadrid.com/donate. Donate anything from €10 on up to however much you want. expatmadrid.com/donate. I will be eternally grateful, and I will give you a shout out at the beginning of my next episode. Hope you're doing well out there wherever you are in the world from beautiful Barcelona. Hasta la próxima. Thanks for listening. Bye.